Good morning, good morning, good morning to our listeners from around the world, and welcome to the global premiere of This Morning with Soulivity. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I am so glad you are here to join us for this great adventure today. I first want to just say I am joined today by some very special friend and Soulivity TV co-host, Sheila Applegate. Hey, Sheila.
Hello there. Good morning.
Good morning. And Teresa Greco. Hey, Teresa.
Hello.
Today is a good day um, because it's all about creating the space for all of us, including our listeners, to have some real conversations about what's going on in our world. We have a very special guest that I will introduce in just a moment to join the fun. But before we begin, I want to let our audience know specifically that this program is for you. We want you to comment, ask questions, give us your thoughts during every single broadcast, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., with a rebroadcast at 11. During the show, I will include some of your thoughts so that we can have a fully interactive conversation. And also today is a giveaway day. At 8:45 a.m., we will give a lucky listener an Amazon gift card for them to use in the new year. So you want to stay on so you may hear your name and you may win that Amazon gift card. So let's get started. Again, ladies, I'm so happy that you're here with me. We have a very special guest that I know each of you were happy to have on the show. Her name is Rochelle Riley. She's a author, essayist, fine arts advocate, and the director of arts and culture for the city of Detroit. She's a dear friend. Let me give a little bit about her. This is just a little bit, everyone. Rochelle Riley ended a nearly 20-year career as an award-winning Detroit columnist in 2019 to become the City of Detroit's Director of Arts and Culture. She now guides the city's investment in its creative workforce and creates opportunities for transformative innovation. She is also the author of 5 books, including the nationally renowned The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery, as well as That They Lived, African Americans Who Changed the World, which answers the questions such as what happened to make young Cassius Clay into the fighter that would one day be known as Muhammad Ali, or what events put children like Frederick Douglass and Aretha Franklin and Thurgood Marshall on the path toward greatness. So with that, we want to welcome Rochelle Riley to the show. Hey, Rochelle.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning. I'm very excited to be here.
Good morning. Good morning. I am so grateful that you're here with us. Um, you know, you've been on the Soulivity platform in different forms for a while now, and whenever you come back, I just smile from ear to ear.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go to Sheila first for a question from her.
All right. There's so much to learn about you, Rochelle. Um, I am really taken with your title, the Director of Arts and Culture. And I think when we weave that together with everything else that you've done and that you do, there's such a profound impact that you can have through the arts. And I'm really fascinated about some of the murals that have been created around your inspiration. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm always thrilled to talk about that. I was a longtime journalist. It's all I ever wanted to do. But in 2019, I decided if I was going to do something else, I better hop to it. So I had lunch with the mayor, Mayor Mike Duggan, and told him that I was going to leave the newsroom and I wanted to find a building so I could create the Detroit Black Repertory Theater because we're the largest city with as large a Black population as we have, and we did not have one. St. Louis has an amazing one. I could go down the list. He didn't hear anything except the word theater. And he said, "Oh, are you interested in arts and culture?" And I said, yes, I'm a painter and a photographer, and I sing show tunes on demand. Why? The city had not had a director of arts and culture for almost 20 years. And the fact that this mayor made that a priority, and he said, I want you to look at this job, director of arts and culture. And I said, what is it? He said, it doesn't exist. How many times do you get to make up the job that you want? Thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do, which means now I oversee the city's investment in arts and culture. And I created the title for the Office of Arts, Culture, and Entrepreneurship, because every artist is a small business. Every dancer is a small business. Every musician is a small business. And I need to make sure that people treat our artists like our creative workforce, which contributes so much to the way we live and the way we enjoy life. As my friend who runs Shakespeare in Detroit said, um, businesses come to Detroit, but art makes them stay. This is the part of your life that brings you joy and is what you want in addition to whatever your business is. So that's the job, and I love it. And one of our major initiatives is Detroit Mural City. USA Today and a panel of judges named Detroit #4 in the country in the creation of beautiful murals, and we're on our way to #1.
That's incredible. And when I was looking into it a little bit, I have to tell you that you've sold me on going to Detroit. Pretty much Detroit's kind of been my stopover place. But now I have this inspiration that I have to get myself over there and hang out and see
Don't,
these murals,
don't
because
fly
they're not
over,
just
come
murals.
through.
What? I'm sorry.
I said, don't fly over, come through.
Exactly. I will come through. I will make it a point. It's not even that far from New York. I can even drive there. But the murals are not, I mean, murals in themselves and everything you just said just is such an inspiration, because I believe that when we move to creativity and arts and culture, and you're right about the entrepreneurship, that's when we really start to live. So how incredible that, you got to create your job and bring such um, knowledge and wisdom into it and experience. But the murals each have a special purpose or meaning, right? Like um, you're very, very, oh my goodness, I can't think of the word. You're inspired by what you do and very purposeful in that.
One of the things that was most important to me, and it's not just fine artists, it's all fine and performing artists and everybody who touches their creative soul in any way, is to make sure they're recognized for their excellence. Detroit has some of the best at everything in the country, and yet people don't really know that or recognize that. So, in a way, I'm continuing the day job I had before. As a
Yeah.
columnist, my job was to inspire and inform and cheerlead, and I do that now. And our mural initiative literally is quite frankly, very innovative. What we're doing is we're creating a database of every mural in the city, and we're putting them on a mural map on the city website. And when you click on it, it will take you to the artist and their bio and ways to reach them, so you learn about who these folks are. You can walk up to any mural with your iPhone, your mobile device, and see who did the mural. I can tell you, I would get phone calls from somebody saying, hey, I'm over here on Mack Avenue and I see this mural and it's beautiful. Who did it? And I'm like, well, I'm not where you are. So
Wow.
but now people can
Wow.
do that themselves, and we're charting them. We have, oh my gosh, I think we're over 300 murals now as we go through and chart them, and there are hundreds more to go. But we want people to know who our artists are, and we want them to enjoy the art. And street art is really exciting. There were 10 cities on that USA Today list. Oklahoma City was #1, which was amazing to me, which means
What?
I know, I know. Philadelphia, which has been doing this for 40 years, we had a conversation where they wanted to learn about what we were doing. I said, are you kidding? You have a mural institute where you teach people how to make murals. So we are now connecting around the country on street art.
Wow. Okay, you guys should see my face around Oklahoma City. I'm
I
like,
know.
okay, and no disrespect to Oklahoma, no
No, they must
disrespect.
be
I'm
doing
just,
something right.
you guys, they're doing it right. Teresa, you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about the Detroit citywide memorial for the victims of COVID-19 that you initiated.
Yeah.
And if you want to maybe talk about, for maybe some people that aren't familiar with what the memorial looks like, but your inspiration for it, and is it still up? Is it something people can still visit? If you could just tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Happy to. So, in the spring of 2020, when we were one of the hardest hit cities with so many people dying literally every week from COVID, we were at a press conference, and this reporter asked the mayor, are you going to do something to acknowledge these deaths where people are going into hospitals and their loved ones can't see them and say goodbye? And he said, absolutely, Rochelle Riley is going to be in charge of that memorial, which meant I was. So I had
Wow.
two, I had two goals. One, well, I did get a heads up that it was coming, but not that soon. But I had two goals. One was we could not have people gather, so there was no way to bring thousands of people together in any way. And the second was we have something here called the Dream Cruise, where cars,
Hmm.
some vintage cars, muscle cars, all types of cars, drive up and
Hmm.
down Woodward Avenue, which is our main drag. It's like the main street of Detroit. It's a huge boulevard that goes through the length of the city and farther north. And they had just canceled it. So I thought, well, we also have an island, so we don't have to shut down traffic. We can just have people drive around and do a memorial cruise around Belle Isle. Then I thought, well, why would they be driving around? What's the point? And then I remember what this woman named Cher Comer said, that my mom died and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye and I didn't have a chance to see her. And she was one of the people who called the mayor and said, we need a memorial. And I said, people need to see their loved ones. So I said, well, we will do billboards. And I'll never forget the mayor's chief of staff said, if you put big billboards out on Belle Isle, people are not going to stay in their cars and not want to take pictures with them, hang out with them, and people will still gather. And I said, okay, I'll come up with a solution. You're right. And I thought, what will keep people in their cars? Funeral processions. Nobody gets out of their car during a funeral
Right.
procession. So I
Right.
so I personally called 11 funeral homes and said, "Would you please participate and send a hearse so that you can lead people in this memorial drive around to look at their loved ones?" And the pictures were all in alphabetical order. There were 924 of them because at that time we had lost about 1,500 people, and because of HIPAA laws, we couldn't ask the health department for pictures. So we reached out to the public and said, if you lost a family member and you want to see their picture in this project, please send it to us. And they sent them in. And what was wonderful is they didn't send posed shots or those shots. What do they call them? The not fantasy shots, but glamour shots.
Glamour shots. Yeah.
They sent their favorite photos. People were in wedding dresses, graduation photos, fun photos. There was just such a mix of amazing memory and humanity. And we had 15 funeral processions around the Belle Isle that day. Um, and nobody got out of their cars. Everybody respected it. They stayed in. There were police escorts. But then we kept the memorial up for 3 more days so people could still keep going through. 25,000 cars went through that first couple of days to see them. And then we had this huge storm coming up that was going to blow them all down. So we went out and got them all up and gave them to the family members.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's yeah. Every
Yeah,
time I hear, I mean, and Rochelle, I knew about this before, and it just it broke my heart, but it also opened my heart at the same time. Um, and it just hearing it all over again just brings back how wonderful that was of a gift to those families and to the city that had gone through so much. And I think since other people heard it around the world as well, they felt. I think there was even some other cities that mimicked some of what Detroit did in terms of memorials. So I thought that was beautiful as well.
there were
So
people doing white flags. There were people doing all types of things because the biggest thing was just to do something with the grief. When you have that type of overwhelming grief
right.
in such a big way with so many people, It was just heartbreaking. And people can go to RochelleRiley.com. I posted some of the news photos. I mean, not just news photos, but news stories, so you can actually see it. I'll never forget one station did this beautiful, beautiful story about it, because we kicked it off right at a certain time, and I got the classical music station. Everybody, I brought in every partner I could, and of course, there was no money to do this, so everybody just jumped in and helped. All the cars, we asked everybody to put their car radio on the same station, and the classical music station played gospel that whole time. So all you heard were bells ringing at the beginning and that music coming from the cars in unison.
Wow.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. Well, listen, we got to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you a little bit about That They Lived. I'm still marveled at this book that you created to tell the stories of African American leaders and other people that are part of our history. And so we're going to take a quick 60-second break, and we'll be right back, everybody.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
And we are back with This Morning with Soulivity. This is Brian Wesley Johnson with my co-host Teresa Greco and Sheila Applegate, and our very special guest, Rochelle Riley, Director of Arts and Culture and Entrepreneurship for the City of Detroit. Rochelle, I had to get this question in. We talked about this before in a previous interview that we did on Soulivity.com about your latest book, That They Lived, of African Americans Who Changed the World. And the beauty and the wonder of this book is that the premise is that you have children dress up as the main person that you talk about. And so there's these images of the child dressed as like Thurgood Marshall, and then an actual picture of Thurgood Marshall next to them. First of all, how did you come up with this concept? How did this all begin for you?
Well, first of all, I was blessed. I am always blessed to be a social media nut. I'm on Twitter all day long. Sometimes my Twitter feed has smoke rising from it, and sometimes it's But while I was working on The Burden, which was a collection of essays I was editing, and I was deep on deadline, but I stopped and took a stroll through Facebook and Twitter, and I saw these amazing photos of this little girl dressed as iconic African American women. I was so moved, not just by the fact that she was dressed like Rosa Parks or Shirley Chisholm, but that she literally embodied their spirit. You could see it in her. The photo of her as Shirley Chisholm, her shoulders are thrown back in like that defiant, don't bother me, unbought and unbossed. I mean, it was just great. But again, I was on deadline on The Burden, so I just saw them and thought, that's wonderful. I reshared them, and then I just went on my merry way. Well, after The Burden came out in February of 2018, they were there again. It was every day of Black History Month, and there was that little girl being more amazing Black women, Nikki Giovanni, Aretha Franklin. I said, I have to find out who this woman is. So I tracked down Christy Smith Jones, And I just sent her a note and said, I love what you're doing with your daughter. And she was teaching her daughter Lola about Black history by having her become these women. I said, this
Wow.
is such an amazing project. And you know what? I would love to work with you because, as you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I got 1,000 words for each of these photos. Let's just do this book, where we can tell these stories. And there's so many of these. We could do a whole encyclopedia. We could have books about scientists and books about business owners. And she said, I'm not doing that. I said, wait a minute. She said, oh no, she is this beautiful spirit, a wonderful wife and mother, homemaker. She did this just to teach her daughter, and it got a lot of attention. She was on the front page of the Seattle paper because she lives outside of Seattle, and people saw them across the country. She was very excited, but she was done. It's like, okay, I need to get my kids to school and I need to move on with my life. So
Right.
I got on a plane and I flew to Seattle, and I got in a car and I drove to Kent. And I found her and took her family to lunch and said, I think this is literally something that could make such a difference in how kids understand history and understand the excellence of people who look like them. Would you please, please do it? And so she finally said yes. And I said, and so, we can do a series of books. She said, no, only one book. I said, well, if we're only going to do one book, we have to also do Boys to Men because, they're really.
Mm.
She said, okay, but we have to find a boy. I said, I've got a boy. So I flew to Dallas and I got my grandson. And what she had done with Lola over a whole month of February, she did with my grandson Caleb over a 4-day weekend at her house that involved a lot of breaks for uh, uh, what's the video game that they're playing all the time? That's
PS2 or
the ones where they battle and they build things.
Minecraft?
Minecraft.
What is it?
Minecraft?
No. I'll think of it in a minute. It begins with an F. I can't believe
Oh,
as much.
Fortnite.
Fortnite.
Fortnite. Thanks to Fortnite and cupcakes, we got through this over a whole 4-day weekend. We would do a half an hour shoot, then we have cupcakes and a break to play Fortnite, and then we go back. But him learning about these folks and becoming these folks, my favorite was his picture of Duke Ellington, where I said he loved music and it made him so happy. And look at this smile, and he nailed that smile. And I went, oh, this is great. But that's how that book came about. And we did it for two reasons. One is to make sure that every child knows that every important person, every famous person was once a child. And second, there are some folks who were going through some real hardships when they were younger, and look at what they were able to do.
Wow. They're probably all your favorites, but do you have one that you're kind of thinking about right now based upon time and place of today?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that because, I'm here in Detroit, and one of my favorite people in the world was Aretha Franklin, whom I got to write about. I interviewed her about how her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, helped a bunch of people organize a march here in Detroit where Dr. Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech 2 months before he did it in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a column while she was living that just thanked her for being the inspiration for so many people, women and men, and how I taught my daughter how to clean while listening to Respect. We would, work around the house to the beat. And I had a chance to ask her, I said, I don't know if you saw this tribute that I wrote to you. And I was kneeling in front of her backstage at the Aretha Amphitheater. And she said, I did read it. It brought me to tears. That's one of those moments in my life I will never forget.
Wow.
But each of the essays was written the same way. It's like, here's who this famous person is, but this is what was happening before. So for the Aretha Franklin one, it says Aretha Louise Franklin would grow up to become the queen of soul, an international R&B singing sensation, and a quiet civil rights leader who helped African Americans gain equality. But when Aretha was 12 years old, she was pregnant. So then the rest is that story of her and all she did. And some of the things I got to write in my column and in the book, people didn't know that Aretha Franklin paid some of the salaries for civil rights workers. I
Yes.
talked to Jesse Jackson about that. And She would bail ministers out of jail. Well, not just ministers, but activists out of jail when they got arrested. She was truly a civil rights leader, and it was a whole part of her life that people didn't really know. So I got to write about a lot of those things.
Wow. You know, that is one piece that stood out to me as well, because I think people just thought that, oh, well, Aretha Franklin was just this entertainer, and that she just, went out here and sung, and, and that was her inspiration, came through her songs. But she did a whole lot more than that.
So much. And, journalists think they know everything. So literally, when I was reading about Jackie Robinson, and everybody knows his sports story and how he made,
Hmm.
but his chapter begins, Jackie Roosevelt Robinson would grow up to be the first African American to play Major League Baseball in the modern era. But when Jackie was a 16-year-old high school student, he was a member of a gang. You could have knocked me over with a feather.
What?
I did not know that until I did the research for this. I spent almost a year just getting every biography, everything I could find. I had a whole library for this collection about all of these folks, reading everything in the world. I didn't know that as a teenager, Martin Luther King Jr. tried to kill himself. I didn't know that Shirley Chisholm, her family was so poor, they sent her to another country for her education and then brought her back. There's just so much that we don't know about who these people are who
Mm,
literally
mm.
went on to great things. And I want our young people to know that and to see that.
And I'm going to let Sheila come in here and ask an additional question, but this book was so important, not only for African Americans, but for Americans as a whole, because this is American history, and it tells the fuller stories of these people who were human beings, who made choices and decisions, grew up with different experiences, and that it's full. It's if people want to go deeper into each one of their histories, their biographies, they can do so using this as a launching point. So it's beautiful. Sheila, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say I agree. This is incredible and so important to people of all ages to read this. And as you're talking, and I am learning things, the book is on order. I haven't read it yet, but I am counting the days till it arrives. um, but as you're talking, I'm just thinking I need to get more copies and put them in the libraries, or donate them to the libraries and to some of the schools around here to get them in their libraries, because it's important for people to see American history, not just on that textbook line of what they did, but who they were, and for each of these young people to be able to identify it, as they move through their struggles, because a
Right.
lot of times people we see ourselves as separate from those who succeed, and we don't remember all the things that they went through. So continuing on this, you've really dedicated yourself to um, making sure that our country and the people in it understand the impact that the Americans slavery had on our systemic racism and what's happening today. And can you talk a little bit about, while we have this, I don't even believe we have this debate. I mean, it seems so ridiculous, but we have this debate of whether people should learn to think critically in our schools.
Right.
Can you talk more about that as we move through the ages and the impact that you think we can have on people when we start to reclaim what our true history was?
Well, I can tell you that we have been, and this is all Americans, the victim of the biggest case of gaslighting ever, because we literally have spent centuries believing that this country was founded by some English activists who came over and did all of the work and built all of the things and made all of the wonderful happen, and that Black folks just didn't have a whole lot to do with it. And then we literally allowed this racism and discrimination for centuries to make sure that Black people did not have the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness the way that everyone else did. And when you look back at that history, you don't really see a lot of that because we don't teach it. There's not a lot about
Right.
enslavement in our textbooks. There's not a lot about all of these amazing Black Americans that happened. And the fact that Reconstruction,
Mm.
really that point after the Civil War where we came together as a country, there were Black US senators, there
Hmm.
was equality in economic power, and racists said, oh no, this is not going to work. And literally upturned all of that. And we let all of that happen and, didn't really do anything about it. Um, and then the other thing that was so stunning to me is you've got a bunch of history professors talking about critical race theory and analyzing what that looked like, that we never talked about race and kept race out of literally our study of history. And they tried to convince people that we were going to teach kids that in school. Nobody was going to teach critical race theory to fifth graders or
No,
eighth graders or anybody in a
no.
public school. That was an examination of this whole, notion that we literally taught people that Christopher Columbus discovered America, like there wasn't anybody here first, that Black people really didn't have much to do, except in February, we would point to those few folks who rose above. And it's one of the greatest crimes in American history. And the only way to fix it is to start actually doing it, which is why I'm so proud of my friend Nicole Hannah-Jones for literally making people pay attention to it. I'll never forget when Michelle Obama was speaking at the Democratic National Convention, and she talked about how um, she taught her daughters that they lived in a White House that the enslaved built, and people were like, "What is she talking about?" As if they thought that George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or any, important, you can't see me doing air quotes, but important person actually laid bricks. We have allowed this sort of horrible, horrible revisionist history to dictate what we are and who we are as Americans without thinking about the impact on our children. I'll never forget when my little girl was a toddler and she padded down to my room one day, waking me up because it was a Saturday and I could sleep in. I said, "What's the matter, sweetie?" And she said, "I don't want to be brown."
Mm.
I thought,
Wow.
"No wonder if all you learn about Black people is what you see in our current system of narrative. All you see is every night, no matter what city you're in, there's somebody who shot somebody or hit somebody or did something. And it's a Black person who's probably representing like 10% of the population of that city, which means
Right.
there's a whole bunch of people who didn't do any of that stuff. But that's
Right.
what you get bombarded with. And then you go to school and you don't learn about any of these amazing people like the ones in That They Lived or the thousands more who did amazing things. That's our fault for allowing this to be who we have taught ourselves to be. And we have to change that.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Rochelle. Um, we're up to another quick commercial break, so we're going to hold it right here. And when we come back, Rochelle, you're staying with us all the way through the 9 o'clock hour. But we're going to start into some of our other hot topics with our host, and we're going to get down deep, not necessarily dirty, but more like empowered with some of the things that are happening in our world. So just hang tight, everybody. We'll be back in 60 seconds.
Hi there, Sheila Applegate here with some exciting news. I've joined the incredible Soulivity team as the host of the new Consciously Awesome live show, where I will be sharing insights to help you discover your full brilliance and claim the vibrant life you deserve. So tune in every Wednesday right here on Soulivity TV to join the fun, and remember to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss a single episode. Have an awesome week, and I will see you on Wednesday.
And we are back with more from This Morning with Soulivity. Um, every show, everybody, we're going to be bringing into the conversation some topics that are happening in our world, maybe it be current events, things that are happening in other countries, here in the United States, Canada, Asia. But we're going to turn it on its dime. We're going to talk about these things in a way that maybe you can get empowered and have a different perspective than what you may hear on other news networks or other podcasts, because we want to empower you every single day and leave you with something that will carry you through your day with some power, light, and love. So I'll begin because there's something that happened this week that hasn't happened in 200 years in our country, and that it took 15 votes for the latest speaker to become Speaker of the House in U.S. Congress. And my question is, I'll go to our humble guest first. What does this mean? I mean, I have my thoughts about it, but what does this mean? And how should people prepare or not prepare for the next 2 years? Because I think that when events like this happen, we all need to pay attention and take note because they're not the norm. And that's why I'm bringing it up as a topic today. So, Rochelle, I'll ask you those questions. What does this mean?
But that's a very deep question, and there are two different answers, Brian. The first is Americans have such a short memory. So what we need to understand is Donald Trump is still running things. That this small cabal of folks who quite literally supported the insurrection and should have all been arrested for treason are on the phone with him, holding up Congress, not holding up Kevin McCarthy from being, the speaker or trying to embarrass him, which happened, but actually holding up Congress. Nobody could be sworn in. Nobody. You're talking about literally 435 representatives in the House and 100 senators, and you could not do any business while they played this game for a while and actually enjoyed it, sort of like he did when he helped take over the Supreme Court, and you had a future justice sitting there saying, "I like beer," and that's what I call him.
Right.
So I don't want to say any of this with anger. I want to say this with resolve and with a patience, so that people understand that we still have to deal with the fact that Donald Trump broke the government.
Wow.
Stole documents and took them down to his playhouse. He, helped people break the law and go to jail. He hasn't been arrested for that yet. And so everything that happens that still has his fingers in it, if we're not careful, we may not ever be able to right the ship. This was not political theater. This was literally a small group of people making sure that government did not work until they decided that it would. And they will do that again and again and again.
Wow. Sheila, what about you?
Well, I agree with everything that you just said, and Rochelle, and I guess looking at it, I think in addition to that, what I see is, I guess this is where we bring in the hopeful part, right? I see our country, going back to the conversation we had earlier about how we have framed and taught a myth of our country and our government for so many generations, and the impact that it's having on our world and our society. And it's like all of that, it's the same frequency of opinion or people that is rising up as we become more conscious as a collective. There is this small group of people who are wanting to keep that suppression, the old way of separating and moving us in this direction that we are actually coming out of. And so we're seeing the idiocracy, I guess, that movie to mind of how how far people will go to keep us stagnant and to keep us from progressing, but also how that is a reaction to the fact that we are progressing. The world is becoming more conscious. Our generations are becoming more conscious. So it's bringing to the surface for us to see that the truth that there are certain people, there are certain belief systems that really don't want us to succeed as a society, don't really care about the constituents, really just care about the game that is being played in that part of our existence. And so I see it as frustrating and a huge reminder for us to pay attention so it doesn't continue to gain power. But I see it as a rising up of what we've buried and bringing it to the surface for us to see it so that we can make a difference. So that's my helpful take, I guess.
One of the things that is most frustrating to me is our children are watching. At a time,
Yes.
we're not teaching history. We're not teaching civics anymore. We literally don't have very important discussions with them about how all of these things work, which makes it easier for these things to happen.
Yeah.
If you literally walked through well, not a high school, but maybe a middle school or junior high school to ask, do you know what just happened and why this was important? This is not a knock on public education because, oh my God, the teachers are doing the best they can considering how underpaid and under supported they are. You won't find a lot of kids who will have understood any of this or paid attention to any of this, but in 20 years, they're going to be the ones that we're going to expect to take this on.
Right.
That's a good
Right.
point. Yeah.
And to both of your thoughts on this, when I saw this happening this week, um, I had to kind of like let myself come out into a panorama and see this from a wider point of view. And number one, this all relates to us not reconciling what happened 300 or 400 years ago into things that, Rochelle, you kind of talked about before with things like, I think most people don't really understand and are not knowledgeable about the things that happened after the Civil War. I think many people kind of know the aspects of slavery in its different kind of forms. I mean, there's things that people don't know about that as well, but things like the Reconstruction, African Americans and others actually had representation in Congress.
Right.
And then within less than 100 years, that representation was gone, and that there was no Black representatives. So when you hear about things like, the first this or the first that, that's actually not necessarily true, because there were people of color represented in Congress before. And so I look at this as a through line where, embracing the Southern strategy in the late 60s, that embraced the darkest and the ugliest parts of our existence, in terms of that, people aren't created equal, and that all people should not be free and not be, not have the same opportunities. I look at this as a continuation of things that are happening, like in Britain right now with the story of Harry and Meghan and some of the things that are coming out about that. And so I would tell people that, listen, this is a time for you to become more aware, go deeper, get books like That They Lived, The Burden more specifically. And there's a whole host of other books out here that you can read and get knowledgeable and personally empower yourself during this time so that you understand a deeper meaning of what's happening here. And that you give that to your children as well. Because again, Rochelle, you brought out the whole important point that, listen, it's going to be our kids that are going to inherit this mess, and that they're going to be the ones that are going to have to, try to clean stuff up and that kind of stuff. So now's the time. Now's the time to empower yourself through education, awareness, and knowledge and power that may turn into some wisdom. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, Brian, I do want to say this too. All of these people, the Matt Gates and the other folks who are filled with such hate,
Mm-hmm.
40 years ago, they were the children of people who taught them to be this way.
Exactly.
And we can just let this continue to happen, because I always ask myself, I wonder what these folks' children are thinking of them, watching this. Nobody's done this story. Nobody bothers kids, and I don't want them to bother kids, but I can't help but just wonder, I really wonder what Marjorie Taylor Greene's children or family members think about who she is and what she's done and what she's doing. And I think the greatest sadness is people literally will bury this truth rather than deal with it, because they're so afraid that it might impact them negatively, personally. It's like that whole thing with, I don't use the word reparations, I use the word repairing, but this whole repairing that never happened because people don't want their lives affected. We literally watched folks across the South. Well, we didn't watch, but we learned the history of folks who across the South literally told formerly enslaved folks, okay, you're free, go ahead. We're not giving you the 40 acres and a mule that Lincoln said you might get, because he, just, do what you can. And by the way, it was illegal to teach you to read. So if you can't read, that's not our fault. And then just go forth. And African Americans did in large parts. And when, white Americans, some of them, but just the ones who embraced the Southern strategy to make sure that white supremacy still reigned, did everything possible to make that not happen. When there were black districts, they burned them down in Tulsa and 8 other places. When there was change in education, it's like, no, don't let them get too educated. And the federal government literally enacted laws that made it possible to keep Black Americans from getting loans for houses, for capital, for business, everything possible to hold down an entire race of people. And these things happen, but we don't talk about it. We don't teach that. We don't let anybody know that. So nobody knows just what we shall overcome meant.
Right.
By overcoming, we overcame a lot more than will ever be taught. And that's the great sadness.
Yeah. I the words that came into my mind as you were speaking is be the change you want to see. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to have to, I implore all of our listeners, being is that first state of consciousness. So you have to be the change, and to make, if these are things that you don't want to see, you got to be it, and then do the things that you need to do so you can have the life that you want to see for this generation and the next. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, Teresa's going to lead us in another discussion for an important topic that she has. So we'll be right back in 60 seconds.
Are you ready to take that first step towards true, unwavering inner happiness? Are you like thousands of people who have everything they need, not want, but need, and still can't seem to find happiness and fulfillment in their lives? If so, the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, you will learn about the principles and practices that lead to true inner happiness. Because guess what? It isn't found in our external environment, but within ourselves instead. Together with my guests, we will explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices. And together, we'll advise you on the actionable steps you can take towards a happier, more fulfilled, authentic life. So I invite you to join me each week on Soulivity TV on the Steps to Happiness show with me, Teresa Greco.
And good morning, everybody. This is Brian Wesley Johnson, and this is This Morning with Soulivity. And we're going to go to Teresa because she has a brand new topic for us to discuss. Teresa?
Thank you. So, with this being the first show and still being the beginning of the year, I wanted to talk about the topic of New Year's resolutions
Mm.
and how some of you might, your feelings around resolutions. Do people create a list? And, is it always that kind of same setup where we have these maybe lofty goals that we might put down on paper or a vision board or wherever anybody might be, let's say, documenting those things, and then working towards it. But then, statistically, just the topic around, deciding to maybe fit more fitness or exercise in around the 6-week mark, a lot of people fall off that wagon and are just, back into their regular habits and ways. And so I wanted to open up the topic around, do people, what are their opinions on resolutions? Do they set them? Don't they? How do they? Do they think they're effective? Do they think that it's, really things that people stick to, or is it something that they fall off of because they're kind of unrealistic? And so I have some thoughts about, how I'm approaching mine this year, but I thought I'd open it up to see, what other people think about that.
So we'll go to our very special guest, Rochelle. How about you?
Well, I can tell you that my friends laugh at me. I have 2 phones and a laptop that I'm never without, but my um, my life is in this little week at a glance book that I put everything. I tell people all the time, if I drop my phone in a mud puddle or something happens to the internet, I know where I am. How about you? And when you open it up, it goes Monday through Sunday, and I don't necessarily do New Year's resolutions because I feel like there's too much pressure to just start it then. So the first week, New Year, I just do everything I want to do. I literally baked a pie and did not share it.
It
Um,
looked good too.
So, but beginning this week, I am going to celebrate some victory every week. It doesn't matter what
Mm.
it is, but there's going to be something that I'm going to be proud of that I accomplished. Either it was something that I was supposed to do, like write another chapter in my book or help somebody do something. But whatever it is, there's going to be that little, spot on that week where I can look at every week and see that I did that. And the other thing is, I mentioned, how unhealthily we live, so many of us, because we're so busy and we, have so many people throwing different things at us, keto diets and how much should you exercise? And I know better than to not do anything. So my resolve was to make sure that I paid attention to that. I'm not going to, make any kind of list or say, okay, I'm only going to eat kumquats on Thursdays or I'm going to walk every day. But I'm going to make sure that I do something every week to make sure that I'm paying attention to my health.
I like that. I like that. The idea of small victories instead of, this maybe drawn out journey toward losing 20 pounds, right? Is that, thinking about just reflecting weekly on some of those small gains are definitely a way to keep us motivated, because it is in taking all of those small steps that we actually get to the finish line. And, we're often so focused on the end goal and not so much on those little small steps and victories. And that's really the way that we achieve those long-term goals, but taking pleasure and finding happiness in all of those small steps. So I love that strategy. Thank you.
And there was one other thing that I did, and it wasn't something that I announced, although I did put it on Twitter. I removed everything toxic from my life, whether it
Mm.
was a person or something that was making me unhappy. That was easy to do. It's hard for people to understand, but it was easy for me to do. And it wasn't something that I did in any type of mean way or in any type of announced way. But I realized that I was spending too much time on things and with people who were not great for my health and for my emotional well-being. Changing that changed my life.
Mm-hmm,
Wow.
mm-hmm. That's also
Wow.
strategy. Absolutely. That's one that I haven't come across, making a conscious decision to create barriers or to let some of that toxicity go as one of the things on the list. So thank you for sharing that one too, because I think it's important for us to be aware of how certain things, certain people, certain environments make us feel, and if we're not conscious about it, we'll just continue to, immerse ourselves in situations that don't leave us feeling good, and actually rob us of our energy and lower our vibration. So I think that that's also, thank you for sharing that, because it's important for us to be aware, and perhaps that could be something that we could add to our lists to actually remove from our lives. So thank you.
Yeah. Sheila, how about you? Are you into New Year's resolutions at all?
Well, not exactly, but I am inspired. It just so happened it was in a conversation we had this week. My youngest child suggested that they, or shared that they have been, every day they write down what they did that day, just a few sentences. And so they can go back, and they're in their 20s. So they can go back and review it, and they remember more. So it's really cool because Justin has a scientific mind, right? So it can be methodical, but what they were telling me is that they remember more about their life, because when you go back and you read even just a little bit of the day, you remember that day separate from all of the other days that you have, because otherwise they all blur in together. So my goal is to do that this year, and I'm gonna go with you, Rochelle, and I'm gonna write it down in a calendar or a daily planner, because if I type it, it will become more of a work task than a personal achievement. So I'm going to do that. And then last night was the Matrix of Illumination. And so
Yes.
I did a channeled message about 2023 and brought in from divine goddess and divine masculine energy, brought in their insights for the year, and it's really pretty incredible. I'm excited about it. And one of the biggest emphasis that was placed on it is practicing receiving, because we're not that good at receiving. I know I'm still working on that. Everybody thinks, oh, it's better to give than receive, but everybody's going around trying to give and nobody's really good at receiving. So I'm going to work on receiving this year as well.
Wow. Well, listen, really quickly, I just put up the giveaway question for today for our listeners out there. And that is, what is one of the books written by Rochelle Riley? If you are the first correct answer, you'll win an Amazon gift card. Just put that title in the chat. And if you're the first correct answer, you'll win. You'll win that card.
Oh my God, Karen, Vince, let me tell you something. I'm just looking at the chat. So
mhm.
I am so
Ah!
amazing stuff over here. Remove toxic anything. Thank you, Karen. And
And look at that. Life's lessons.
burnt down Black Wall Street. Yeah, oh, yeah, they knew what they were doing. This is amazing. I wasn't paying attention to this. But the most important thing I'm seeing over here, and Karen's on a roll, so thank you, Karen. The most important thing, I want people to make sure they understand, I'm not angry, because when you harbor hate or anger, whatever it is, I forgot who said it, but the saying was, anytime you're harboring something bad, it corrodes from within, which means if you're
Yes.
harboring the hate, it's eating away your insides. But the thing that I do feel is a sense of embarrassment and shame for not doing something sooner. For about 15 years, I've been doing this One America, One History thing to try and get people to understand that Black history should not be separate. And Karen wrote, this is our own fault for not teaching and learning our background. And that is absolutely true. I know in my family, we did that, but we still did it separately from what we learned at school. So I did my stuff at school and made my A's. Then I came home and learned all this other stuff. And not once did I think, why are these two things separate? So that's interesting that that is literally how this happened and how America, the bigger America, got away with this, because we allowed it. We just said, okay, we're going to learn this stuff because that's what it takes to get along. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I tell people all the time, I majored in journalism and white people. And I don't say that with any type of hatred or any type of racism, but I
Right.
knew what it would take to be successful in a world where what they thought was more important. And I would have to fight to make sure that my thoughts, because I am unapologetically Black, I was with my column, I am in my life, that was how I would be able to get in the door and to do the things that needed to be done for people to see that different is not worse.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Rochelle, listen, we're out of time, but on behalf of all of us, thank you for being here and sharing your voice. Every time you're with me, you always have something important to say that I have to go back and write down later so that I can remember it. But yeah, I mean, these are important work. I mean, these are important thoughts that I think all of us need to embody. And so thank you. Would you come back and join us again for another conversation?
I will. This was amazing. I want to thank your co-host. I want to thank the listeners. I want to encourage people to follow me on Twitter, because since I'm not writing my column, that's where you'll learn more about what I think. And I want to tell you what my profile says. I'm a Detroiter, writer by trade, warrior by necessity. And even though I'm the director of arts and culture for the city of Detroit, I do a whole lot of things. And this is the most important. I am not just my ancestors' dream. I am their victory.
I love that.
Wow. Listen, everyone, you can buy Rochelle's latest books, including That They Lived, African Americans Who Changed the World, either at our Go shop at go.soulivity.com or wherever books are sold. We also want to congratulate our giveaway winner, and Rochelle, you know who it's going to be. It's Karen. Karen won. Yeah, Karen won our Amazon gift card. Karen, just send us an email at soulivity@soulivity.com so we can get your contact information, and we'll get that right out to you. Ladies, this has been wonderful. Teresa and Sheila, as always, you're just amazing. I love you both.
And Brian, let me just say this. We know why you're successful, because here's your first fantastic show and you surrounded yourself with women.
Absolutely.
Exactly, right?
Absolutely.
Thank
Mama
you
didn't
for
raise no fool.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Rochelle.
Oh, man. Listen. Well, everybody, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thanks for joining us for our first episode of This Morning with Soulivity. We hope that you come back and join us every single day, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern, or listen to the rebroadcast, which will occur at 11 a.m. Eastern for all of you on the West Coast. Until next time, keep having real conversations with passion and purpose, and create a life full of high quality living today. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.